might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's Customer Data Platform Summit India, brought to you by Lemnisk. I am Subra Krishnan, CEO of Lemnisk, and I will be your host today. A very quick word on Lemnisk before kicking off. Lemnisk's customer data platform-led personalization and marketing automation delivers superior customer experiences that result in increased conversions, retention, and growth for enterprises. The key capabilities include the ability to uniquely resolve a user in real time across different data sources and channels, creating one-to-one hyper-personalized experiences for each user across multiple marketing channels, orchestrating individual customer journeys on the right channels at the right time using a proprietary inbuilt AI engine called Ramanujan. Lemnisk has offices in Dubai, Singapore, Bangalore, and Boston. Lemnisk is ISO 27001 and ISO 27018 certified. For more information, please visit www.lemnisk.co. That's lemnisk.co. You can also email us at marketing@lemnisk.co if you're looking for CDP-driven marketing automation or personalization this year. So that's the quick introduction out of our way. So let's dive right in. So today's Customer Data Platform Summit is actually the third and final of 3 summits that we planned across Southeast Asia, Middle East, and India regions. We had our Singapore and Dubai events earlier this month, which was very, very well received. And so today is actually the India session, and we have a very, very exciting session planned today as well. I was actually a little bit worried in the beginning about attendance, given today was the scheduled third day of the Motera test match. But well, as we all know, that's not an issue anymore. So we can just enjoy the conference without worrying about what the score is. Now, we put together this event focused on data-driven marketing, mainly because we are seeing a strong trend in this region among marketeers who are starting to understand and leverage the power of their customer data. I think it's also fair to say that as we slowly heal from the scars of COVID-19, being data and digital savvy is no longer a trend, but almost a survival mandate. The speakers today represent some of the sharpest minds in the region who are at the forefront of this trend and are experts at harnessing data to transform their businesses. As a digital marketing enthusiast, I couldn't be more excited. I'm really, really looking forward to the session today. So here's a quick summary of what's in store ahead. We will kick off today's summit with a panel session titled Modern Marketing Stack for the Decade Ahead. Deepak Oram, Head of MarTech and Automation at HDFC Bank, Mayank Gupta, Senior Director D2C Business Auto at Acko Insurance, Gaurav Sanghvi, Head Digital Business at DSP Mutual Fund, will talk through how to build a future-proof MarTech stack and the approaches and best practices on collecting, organizing, and analyzing customer data. I will introduce them in more detail when we start off in a few minutes. After the panel, in a fireside chat titled Transformative MarTech Leadership, we will have Sanjay Pereira, Senior Vice President at National Development Bank PLS Sri Lanka, talk about what it takes to craft and execute a successful digital transformation strategy. The last panel session for this evening, titled The Rise of the Super Intelligent Marketer, will feature Sapna Desai, Head of Marketing and Online Sales at Manipal Cigna Health Insurance, S. Swaminathan, the Executive Director Group Strategy at RK Swami Hansa Group, and Vaidyanathan Ramani, who's Head Product and Innovation at Policy Bazaar. They will talk about customer experience in the decade ahead, driving business outcomes with customer data, and leveraging machine learning and AI effectively. So there you have it. That's the packed agenda that we have for today. What a fantastic afternoon ahead. As I said, I'm really, really excited. Now, we will stay on time, so we don't expect to really have a lot of delays and beyond maybe a few minutes across these sessions. So yeah, so grab your popcorn and stay glued to the sessions. Let's dive right in. Wonderful. So let's start off our first event for the day, Modern MarTech Stack for the Decade Ahead. Succeeding with modern marketing requires a combination of out-of-the-box thinking, creativity, and a strong techno-analytical bent of mind. Our speakers for the first panel today have demonstrated all of these skills many times over in their careers. Our first speaker is Deepak Ora. Deepak started his journey in digital in the early days of the internet in the late 90s as a teenager. He honed his skills as an entrepreneur, managing and marketing his own digital businesses from selling internet server infra to online graphic design. Early inclinations towards coding and developing digital businesses led Deepak to explore digital marketing as a career, and he spent time in ICICI Bank in digital acquisitions, after which he built the complete marketing and straight through processing stack for IDFC First Bank. In his current role at HDFC Bank, Deepak dedicates his time to imagining new innovations for a large data-driven marketing team. He owns the charter of bringing to life insight-led omni-channel customer experiences by re-engineering HDFC Bank's marketing stack hidden behind and tightly integrated into its digital platforms. Deepak enjoys psychology, anthropology, and technology, a subject matter which he draws upon to inspire his technology and customer experience decision making. Welcome, Deepak. Our next speaker is Mayank Gupta. Mayank is a startup enthusiast and loves to build and grow businesses ground up. He has been working in the insurtech space for the last 6 years and has been pivotal in the growth of CoverFox, an insurance aggregator, and Acko, a digital-first insurer. Currently, he leads the growth for direct-to-consumer vertical of auto insurance at Acko. In his leisure time, Mayank loves to take his 2-year-old daughter on an ice cream date. He also mentors startups on their digital strategy. We round off our elite panel today with Gaurang Sanghvi. Gaurang is currently the head of digital at DSP Mutual Fund. He has over 15 years of experience in finance, consulting, and digital. Gaurang has previously worked in organizations such as Vcash, Tala, RBL Bank, Jimmy, and Maypro Foods. He has also had a brief stint as an entrepreneur by founding 2 companies, Instacash and Budget Messenger. Deepak, Mayank, Gaurang, a very, very warm welcome to the panel, Modern Martech Stack for the Decade Ahead. Thank you so much for taking the time out today. Really appreciate your time. Without further delay, once again, a warm welcome to the panel, and let's just get started. So I will kick off this panel session, with a question. Maybe Deepak, I'll go with you first, and then I'll sort of go around the panel once. So one of the things that we're obviously seeing, and maybe the pandemic to some extent has accelerated it, is that customers are increasingly going more and more digital. They are leaving a lot more digital trail or digital footprint behind, and also there is a sort of explosion of customer data, if you will, across so many data sources and touch points now. So I think one of the first questions that marketers generally have, and maybe that's where you could start and sort of we can try to understand your thought process. How do you really try to control and make sense of this data? Maybe let's start there. Or to you, Deepak.
So Subra, I think it's a different situation for banks, right? So while the traffic on our websites and properties, right, people exploring products has gone up, it has not gone up beyond your typical year-on-year increase, about 10 to 20%, right? So what is the reason? And of course, if you're a digital-first business, maybe it might be slightly different for you because people will then come to you more because people can't move out of their houses, they can't go to a store, so they don't. So they will probably start using Amazon or a Swiggy or one of these things, more. But for a bank, what I've realized is that while the people are coming onto the website, are trying to look at financial products, there is no need for financial products as such currently in their lives, at least the last 6 to 9 months. And people stop traveling, people stop like furnishing their house, people stop swiping their credit card, they stop going for dinners, right? So they stop looking. There was lack of demand in the market itself, right? So little funny question to answer, because so I know if you are stuck at home, you will go more digital. But as a banker, I've not noticed people coming that much more, because I think the demand for financial services has actually gone down because of the situation we are in, right? Because lifestyle constrained is constrained in such a way that people do not want to spend money or do not want to take any big life decisions, financial decisions. So digitally, people have not come so far, at least from a bank, I can tell you. I'm sure if you are an e-commerce company or if you are in the digital first industry, probably a different case for you.
Got it. Got it.
My analysis basically is there's a huge latent need. There's a huge latent need, and it'll and of course I'm counting my chickens before they hatch. But next year, I think the numbers will go big time. Right, in the next financial year, with the lockdown, we do unlock. Right, there's a huge latent need to live life, travel, buy things, which will come to the fore in the next year, and we should see some roaring numbers for banks, at least, especially on the digital side.
Got it. Got it. I'll come back to you on that, because I do want to make sure that we also get a sense from you in terms of how you can go about collecting and organizing this data. But let me go to Gaurang and then to Mayank. Gaurang, your thoughts. Like, what are your thoughts on how you really try to make sense out of the data in terms of organizing it and collecting it?
So I think contrary to Deepak, right, while people have not had ways to spend their debit card or credit cards, they have found ways to spend on their investment accounts, right? For the first time, people have had time to think, right? Yes, markets have been extremely volatile, but markets are volatile as the nature of the game. But people have time to reorganize and reassess their financial situation and their investment journey. And, I think unlike this thing, and I say this for the most of all industry as well, people who were digitally first or had the digital native context as a mutual fund or an asset management company or any distribution of financial product have seen a complete change of context, right? That earlier the requirement was that you come to my house, I'll fill up a form. Now it's gone, right? Because we're not going to physically meet around. Coming to one of your questions was that today customers are leaving interesting tidbits of who they want to be and when they want to be, so that for any digital organization can learn from them and then assess their business model and align to the customer, right? Now there is no excuse of not knowing your customer well enough, right? Or finding surrogates. If you don't have those data sets of a given customer, at least creating some form of first level of human and human induced correlations and eventually a system driven correlations of cohorts. Yeah. Right. And we're sitting in a very, very interesting trajectory that whatever investments today organizations make in their technology will not have a 1x, 2x, 4x, but possibly have a 100x potential for their online business in the next 5 to 7 years. And, that's the question people have to answer, especially at the enterprise side.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Mayank, maybe your thoughts, and you could jump in with, some perspectives on how you've done it at CoverFox and Acko before. I know you have really built some of these systems here. So why don't you jump in here?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. So, first of all, as Deepak said, maybe at HDFC, they were saying they weren't seeing, much of a growth or much of a shift in the consumer experience. But in the InsurTech space, right, while the COVID happened, the link between agent, dealer, and the user got broken completely. And in the first 2 months, maybe, the April and May, we were not seeing any demand. But post that, the surge in demand, I believe, was very much on the, digital side only, on the InsurTech space, right? And at least at Acko, we have a very wide array of touch points, including your web app, contact center as well, the entire MarTech, and all of the marketing activities which we do, which is maybe a pull or a push form, whatever, right? And it becomes really, really important to understand that what these users are communicating to us, and then it becomes really important that you really can't think in silos. You have to make sure that there is one system which sits, in between, wherein you, collect every sort of information. First to collate every sort of information, and those could be structured, those could be unstructured, you never care. First is the understanding is you have to collate everything, and once you have it, you make sure, okay, how can I read it, right? How can I make any sense out of it? Then comes to the basic point, okay, now I have all the information from all valid touch points. What sort of cohorting I can do to make any sense out of it. Now, these cohorts could have multiple use cases. There are multiple functions within the org, right? Let's say a product team or an underwriting team or a marketing team, right? For a marketeer, maybe my marketing team would like to understand if a consumer, who has landed on Acko, if that user is price sensitive, or maybe he is a brand loyal, right? Or maybe he would respond to the servicing angle more compared to the pricing, right? Now, until unless I don't understand those things, or maybe we don't understand those things, we really can't communicate in the right way. The same thing goes for the product as well. Gone are the days wherein we have one plain vanilla product for everyone. You'll always be on the minimum of the conversion rate, right? You have to find out those small pockets, cohorts, wherein you can say, okay, can I personalize my stuff? Can I write a better web copy? Can I give you a better product recommendation? Can I give you a better insurance declared value or not? Can I give you a better servicing? Then you will find out, that, okay, those small pockets, when start improving, when start converting better, you find a global maximum of conversion rate, right? So at Echo, every time we have started believing in, it's very important to understand the user. Okay, and to understand the user, you have to understand that what is he doing. Now when you say what is he doing, because he's available on 5, 6, 7, 10 touch points, you have to first collate everything, start making some sense out of it, create cohorts, and then respond. You really can't respond in the dark, otherwise you're just shooting in the dark. Sometimes you will hit it, most of the times you'll miss it. So that's how we are going about it. And I believe in the last 2.5 years, where have been operational, we have barely started scratching the surface. But I mean, real exciting times ahead while we see some real success.
Absolutely. I think like Deepak was also saying, I think we just scratched the surface of digital, and it's great. So I think Gaurang, you spoke of who and what, and of the user, and Mayank, you touched upon the need to really aggregate all data sources and then really try to build cohorts. Deepak, I want to come back to you here, and I know that you mentioned that while during the pandemic, you didn't see a big shift in traffic, right? But certainly, I know that HDFC as a bank has been extremely strong. That is one thing that really stands out every time we look at HDFC Bank and what it's doing, right? So, from your perspective, what are ways in which you try to understand the user? What kind of user insights do you try to extract and leverage, from the sort of data that you're seeing? And how do you use this intelligence to drive business outcomes? Give us some sense of that. You're on mute.
My bad, I was on mute. So I think, look, HDFC Bank has taken a journey over the last 3 years. So very simply, typical traditional bank, right? They'll, the understanding was always that, look, so people banking with us, you swipe your cards with us, you invest with us, or from at least your salary getting credit to your bank account. We know a lot about you. That was the understanding that a lot of us, at least a lot of traditional bankers had. Right? How has that changed in the last 3 years? It has changed dramatically in the last 3 years, right? Because see, everyone is not loyal to you, right? And when we've been learning through surveys, through just customer research, consumer research, that everyone has 3 bank accounts. Look at yourselves, everyone here in this group, you probably have 3 bank accounts.
Yeah.
So slowly, the bankers have started realizing, boss, while you have a bank account with me, I may not be a preferred partner in banking, right? So you may not be doing your credit card swipe with me, or you may not be doing your salary credit with me, but you just hold a credit card with me, for example. So we know only as much about you as we are engaging with you, right? The moment you get turned off by a bank, the less and less we know. It's like it's a snowball effect, right? So that creates a huge problem for us, right? So then we started thinking, okay, look, this might be customer who is not engaged with us, but what is he doing on our properties, on our website, on our apps, right? The customer probably can be upgraded into a higher, more engaged customer. So while you know a lot about your customers who are already engaged with you, you do not know so much about customers who are not so well engaged with you.
Sure.
So that part we're building now, the entire digital footprint, who does what, right? Which kind of customer who's engaged has what kind of behavior on the website versus a disengaged customer or a intermediate level engagement customer, right? So we're trying to figure stuff out. Okay. Now then, once you have done that, saying this is a customer who I have a physical footprint, a physical transaction on, and some digital behavior, let's find out people who have no transactions with us but have digital behavior that is similar to people who have a transaction behavior with us. So we're looking at surrogates of transaction behavior with digital behavior, right? This could be prospects. This could be people who are not very engaged with us. And this data set also we go after and say, look, he may not have 10 lakh rupees in the account today, but his digital footprint seems like he probably has it.
Yeah.
That's what our lookalike model tells us, right?
Yeah.
So that way, I think become interesting, and bankers are slowly learning the value of digital data and digital footprints in conjunction with your transaction data, your salary, your financial information can be a gold mine. Not a gold mine because you want to monetize the data, but because you want to serve the customer better and figure out who has more value that you can offer to.
Wonderful. Now, there's some fantastic insights there. And I think I especially like the point that you made about lookalike and using that to understand user behavior. Gaurang, let me come to you there, because I know that you have also tried many of these things. You iterated on it multiple times. And I think for DSP, I know that the data journey has been a sort of pretty long one now. So what kind of insights have you managed to extract and use, and sort of what sort of business outcomes have you seen? Just talk us through that a little bit.
See, in our profession, right, and we are perhaps the midway between a pull product, which is a savings account, to a insurance, which is completely a push product, right? We're actually in the context where we are slightly confused in who we exist for the user, right? Eventually, customers want to give you money that you, as an organization, grow, right? As a digital platform, my job is to ensure that 2-3 things happen. We become a responsible investment platform, right? What it means is that, am I showing the right financial product for the right customer, or the reverse, right? That if somebody has achieved a particular growth rate in a particular subsector that they invested purely because they saw past returns, can I tell you about that, right? That, the gold rally, for example, was a great rally last year. We don't know what it looks. I'm just giving an example. Don't take me as the context of this thing. But understanding the user and what his objective is becomes exceptionally critical in our space, right? Because we are now running a multi-year journey, and we're only hoping to be your investment platform for not just a decade, but a multi-decade context. And hence the relationship building through right and responsible advice is critical, and that only can happen by narrowly understanding your customer segment and what they want to do without they communicating it, right? And that's the hard part, right? What parts of the sites they're spending more time on? How are they, responding to the risk indicators that we are showcasing, and so on and so forth, right? It's an endless or a continuous spiral. But the fact of understanding customer insight and what they want to achieve, can we make them achieve at the easiest, most possible? And if they are contrary to our opinions, how can we let them be more educated about the same?
Got it. Mayank, just echoing Gaurang's thoughts there in terms of narrowly understanding your user and then being able to sort of copy. I think some of what you were saying also mirrors that, Mayank. So if you could maybe just also talk about the kinds of business outcomes you've seen, because I know there are many people in the audience listening in right now who'd love to sort of understand the linkage between sort of understanding data and then sort of revenue or downstream metrics. So just talk us through that a little bit from your perspective as well.
Sure. See, first of all, there are like multiple outcomes, which we influence from the data, right? If I were to talk about the North Star matrix, right, for any direct to consumer brand, these 4 metrics are very critical, which is how is your top of the funnel trending? Then if let's say 100 users are landing on your website, what would be the conversion rate? Then, if 100 users are buying from you, what's the average purchase order value, right? And fourth is, if 100 users have bought from you, how can you make sure that you retain, if not 100, most of them, right? Let me pick up one of the North Star metric, which is a conversion rate, which could be a KPI of a product manager, maybe, right? So now, when I say we have to understand users much better, and if I were to extend my argument on cohorting, right? So our attempt is always try and understand users wherein, there's a cohort of users wherein we say if they are affordable or not. Okay, if the affordability is low or high. Okay. Yeah. Then second could be, if their digital engagement is low or high. Okay. Third is maybe if their novelty is low or high, let's say, right? When I say novelty is around if the user could try multiple merchants or multiple brands or not, or maybe he's a brand loyal, he would retain to the same merchant, right? While he could be an explorer, but when it comes about, paying the money, he will never do that, right? Now let me pick one of the cohorts, let's say affordability. So a user who has a high affordability compares to a user who has a low affordability. No point, talking about savings to a user who has very high affordability. Yeah. Right. Compared to the one, if a user has low affordability, you talk about how good a great brand you are, and you are not even saying that, I am a great brand, but you will end up saving $100 compared to the other person, right? That's how I'm placed, and yet you enjoy the best servicing as well. So you have to see what's the leading communication basis the cohort. The second thing, maybe let's say a user who has the higher affordability, we have an opportunity to increase the average order value as well. So I would say maybe I'll recommend him a plan, which is like a bundled offer, wherein a user wouldn't even think twice, that because he would see things not an incremental value, he would say, okay, it's only worth $200 and I can enjoy many benefits, let's just go ahead, right? Compared to a one who has a low affordability, if I say, this plan is just $199, he would say, man, I was even wondering if I could buy a 3,000 rupee product, and you are saying, can you also attach a 199? Okay, I'm going, right? So now these things become really, really important while we talk about cohorting and about recommendation. Let me just extend to the other cohort as well. Let's say a digital engagement. So Echo is of the philosophy, while at least we are trying to, again, we have just barely scratched the surface there, that we don't want to assist every user who doesn't need assistance.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah.
There are users, internet penetration is increasing. People are not that ignorant about the products. They do their research on internet and everything, right? And there are cohort of users who don't want to get called by contact center agents. We have our case studies wherein when agents are talking to customers, they become detractors, right? So no point that every time you want to give an assistance. So let's say if a digital engagement is I'll allow that user to consume the product which I have built by my blood and sweat, right? Rather than giving a contact center agent, okay, go and assist that user. Okay, so I'll maybe bypass those 50% of users who have high digital engagement and tell them, why don't you consume the product and buy on your own? Maybe after a week I'll reach out to you to understand, sir, what happened wrong, what went wrong, right? And the other class of users who has low digital engagement, just after I have told them what services I sell, I have to ask them, sir, is there any assistance I can give you? Were you thinking of some other plan? What's the problem you are facing on the website? So these things really matter, not only in driving business outcomes, but a very great customer experience as well. Wherein how do you personalize, the experience for the user? And the personalization comes when you treat me the way I am, rather than you treat me to like an average, cohort.
Yeah.
So that's how we are trying to build drive the business outcomes, I would say.
Fantastic insights there. I think from all three of you, I think there are some very, very valuable points that we can take away. So let me ask a question again, maybe back to you, Deepak. I know you've done this across ICICI, across IDFC Bank, and across HDFC as well. As an expert, let's say and you're trying to advise somebody who's just getting started on their MarTech journey, on their data-driven marketing journey, right? So, given all that you have learned, and I'm sure there have been pitfalls and some mishaps along the way as well. What are some of the tips, best practices that you would offer to marketers who are just getting started with digital? Your perspectives there would be very valuable.
I think, look, the first thing that I have always felt is important before you think about technology investments is that how data driven is your organization, right? That's something that I've always felt is a precursor to success in terms of investments in MarTech. Right, a lot of organizations tend to not have this data-driven operating model, right? Saying, look, I will look at my dashboard every day. I will not only look at my overall numbers, but I'll drill down to at least level 3 and see what is happening. Right? That inquisitiveness, that curiosity has to be there within the organization first. How do you build it? Is of course is for digital native organizations that comes very, very easy because that's your bread and for slightly offline organizations, you have to work a little hard to build that culture in the first place. But to me, that's the starting point, right? For leaders to ask questions of their 1, 2, 3 down, saying, do you know what happened to this customer segment in this month? And is that segment growing? And there has to be a granular sort of micro segment saying, do you understand this micro segment? Who's profitable to you? So this culture in the first place has to be set up, and the only people who can set up are the leadership, right?
Yes.
They have to ask the right questions. Then once you ask the question, the team will come back to you and say, "Sir, I cannot give you information because my dashboard doesn't have this feed. Okay, my customer, customer first party data is not organized correctly, or it is in somewhat of a lag. It refreshes once a month, sir. I cannot give you that information today. Please, can I come back in the next meeting and give you?" Right? That will give you a good perspective on, okay, great. At least my team has gone ahead and tried, and they are not able to do it. Then slowly you will realize, if I enable my teams, and especially the teams that are empowered with this inquisitiveness, this curiosity to understand and deep dive into customers, then you empower them with MarTech tools. I think you will see some great conversations happening within multiple teams in your organization, right? Because there's burning questions which were never able to be answered before, and suddenly you give them a tool where not only they can understand, and of course, holy grail, they can act upon it also in real time if you can. That is the way I think progress happens. So I think this data-driven culture needs to be thought of first. Then the investments, and then you can then track how the investments are helping this culture that you've already created. So to me, Subra, that is the first point of starting, especially in traditional organizations. Digital first organizations, I think it is somewhat of a given, but again, there is no harm in building the culture again. But to me, from a traditional organization, that is the first thing you should start with.
Wonderful. No, that's so valuable. Start from the top, and because culture starts there, and build that data-driven culture is the key message that you gave, Deepak. It's a wonderful one. In fact, in the next session with Sanjay, I would love to ask him about some of these things as well. So we'll be covering that in the next session as well. Gaurang, your views, any pitfalls, any best practices, learnings, tips from your side?
I think the first context is about understanding what you want to achieve, right? In anything especially in data, because you can get lost and biases can be created very, very fast. If you start looking at the data in a way that it's not serving the objectives that are laid out, right? And eventually this is a landmine, right? This is just endless amount of, I'd like to, have this word, and please allow me if this thing, right? Intellectualization, or perhaps paralysis by analysis, right?
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah. So analysis by paralysis. So question has to be asked as a group together, that what do we want to achieve, and create micro goals. I normally am not a big fan of achieving the large things. Once they are set, the direction is set, then just create micro goals and try to achieve it. It's literally like putting a brick on a wall, right? Once you know where you want to put a wall and what's the structure of this thing, take a brick at a time and cement it, and it's okay if some bricks fail, right? So one of the pitfalls is that you should not take this exceptionally at the face value. You should allow the data a few alteration and churn before you can say that this particular brick that I'm laying is the right one. It's the right dashboard. It's looking at the right metrics. At the same time, it will serve the larger purpose at hand, right? So it's a multi-level strategy where you put your vision out there, but you look micro and allow even the micro dashboards or what you have analyzed, allow it to fail. It's okay that what you looked at, it makes no sense a month later, right? And that's the culture that needs to be set in, because traditionally, once things are set in, we assume that they should just be repeated. And I think in digital world, that is perhaps the last thing that you should be doing.
That's a wonderful, wonderful point there. I think just coming on the back of Deepak's point in terms of starting from the top and building a culture, I think the crux that you brought in is, look, don't have analysis paralysis, and don't try to interpret data in a way that it suits you, or biases can be created very quickly. I think these very, very valuable points right there. Mayank, your views on this in terms of learnings, pitfalls, best practices, etc.
So I mean, by best practices, I'm always of the believer, fail and learn. So but anyway, I would like to reflect upon, or maybe in terms of best practices, is a problem solving framework, which over the 9-10 years I have realized that a framework, if not put it rightly, it's like a recipe for complete disaster. Okay, so let's say as digital marketeers, from top down, right, from the CMO to the manager or the executive, right? There are different level of matrix, some North Star matrix, then L1, L2, L3. And every metric will be linked with an Uber goal. That let's say at top of the funnel, then you have to get, let's say, 1 million MAU and whatnot, right? So there would be different Uber goals linked to it. Now, when we talk about, then there will be targets, right? That today the status quo is that you might be sitting at 2 million MAU, you have to take it to 5 million MAU, right? And now there the things start failing, wherein, when your manager asks, how can I do 5 million MAU? You start thinking of the solutions.
Yeah.
Okay, what are the solutions to do 5 million MAU? That's like a recipe for disaster to me, because you have to create your hypothesis that, okay, why am I not able to do 5 million? What are the reasons? When you think of the hypothesis, solutions are right across the corner. Yeah. But what we do, we don't think of the hypothesis that why are we not doing 5 million, or why are we stuck on 2 million? And you start jumping on the solutions directly, there the whole framework fails. So I'll give you an example. How do solutions arrive on their own? Let's say as a marketer, if I were being given a task that, I have to create 1 million prospects every month, right? Who could take a quote from Echo, and I'm sitting at, let's say 200 or 1,000, so the way we approach the problem is, wherein, okay, is coverage an issue? Okay, am I reaching out to all the right audiences or not? Okay, maybe the question would be yes or no. Let's say the question is no. Okay, am I using all the right channels? Or maybe, maybe geography is an issue. I'm only in, Bangalore and Hyderabad. I could expand to Delhi as well. So my coverage will automatically be there and I can drive the growth, right? Okay, coverage, check mark, let's go to the other one. Maybe I'm reaching out to the right audiences, but people are not responding to me, right? Okay, so got it. So maybe a CTR is an issue, right? Okay, is my messaging right? People are not even clicking on my message. They don't even respond. I'm investing maybe millions of dollars on TVC, but people don't even understand what do I stand for, right? Then that becomes a CTR issue. Okay, people do respond to me, but they don't even come to my website. Okay, inward looking, I have designed a great looking website, but my page performance is so poor, people don't even come to it. They are not able to land on it, right? Okay, what's the issue? Am I firing random, pixels? Have I just so many third-party scripts or whatever, right? Or maybe I'm using images which are so heavy in nature, I need to get rid of them. Now, when the user is on your website, then also he's not showing intent. Maybe what's the reason? Maybe you are a brand, he's not trusting you. Okay, maybe your form maybe your form is not correct, or maybe whatever the reasons are. So that's how you are trying to understand, okay, what are your hypotheses, and then you arrive at a solution rather than just thinking this is my Uber goal and this is the solution. Okay, this I have felt, keeps throwing solutions every fortnight, every month, and you will never be, empty of your bucket. Wherein, what do I need to solve for?
Wonderful. That's a fantastic thought, because I've seen this as well with in some of the sort of customer meetings I've been, where the focus is very much on I need this, whereas once you really take a consultant perspective and dig a little deeper, there are more foundational problems that you probably need to understand, form those hypotheses in terms of where performance is potentially stuck, and oftentimes the solution may not even be sort of buying one more new MarTech tool. It could be elsewhere, right? So yeah, fantastic thoughts there. Just sort of running towards the end of the mark here, so I will have to close this call. Though I think I would have loved to ask a few more questions of you three, but thank you very much, Deepak, Mayank, Gaurang, gentlemen. Thank you. This is an incredibly insightful session. Really enjoyed speaking with you, and I think for the people listening in, there are so many nuggets of information there. So thanks a lot for joining today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Shubhra.
Thank you.
Bye. So let me just get started by introducing our panelists for the session. So the session is actually titled the rise of the super intelligent marketer, right? Now, the idea, the first session really talked about some of the modern marketing principles and ideas in terms of how can you think about marketing, how can you think about data-driven marketing, and then also talked a little bit about how you can think about organizing your tools, organizing your MarTech ecosystem, right? And how can you really do all of this effectively, right? In this session, the rise of the super intelligent marketer, we will talk to a few exceptional MarTech leaders who have converted these principles and ideas we spoke about in the last session into hugely successful data-driven marketing strategies. So let me introduce them without further ado. Sapna Desai is our first speaker. Sapna is head marketing and online sales at Manipal Cigna Health Insurance. Sapna is responsible for developing and implementing the overall marketing and brand strategy to drive the growth agenda for the organization. She leads the consumer insights, brand strategy, and media, corporate communication, channel, and digital marketing functions. Before joining Manipal Cigna, she was responsible for providing strategic direction and leadership for financial brands at Ogilvy Advertising, Mumbai. She has also worked across service industries, including ING Life Insurance, Indian School of Business, and BPL Mobile in various marketing roles. Sapna has rich experience in all aspects of direct, mass, and digital marketing, besides having managed some of the largest and respected brands. She also has experience in business development and product management in the services sector. Sapna is a commerce graduate with an MBA from NMIMS Mumbai and has been a jury member at various ad clubs, MVs, FEs, ABBYs, IAMAI, and DMAI awards. So Sapna, warm welcome to the panel session to you.
Thanks, Shubhra. That was a long introduction, and this whole summit, I didn't know that I was part of it, marketing, technology expert and stuff like that. But we have a lot of learnings, so thanks for that, and look forward to this conversation.
Wonderful. Our next speaker is S. Swaminathan, Executive Director, Group Strategy, RK Swami Hansa Group. Swami is an executive director at RK Swami Hansa Group. At RK's Hansa, Swami is looking at the integration of marketing communications, marketing research, technology, digital and analytics for the RK's Hansa Group, which is one of India's leading marketing services firms. Swami was previously the co-founder and chief executive officer of Hansa Customers Equity, a data analytics and MarTech firm based out of India. He has over 30 years of experience, having a rare blend and balance of both data-driven skills, design thinking, and marketing experience. Swami has successfully worked with leading blue-chip clients by using the power of data, analytics, customer interaction and technology platforms, and agency thinking, program management, and consulting capabilities to deliver exceptional value and results for his clients. He has managed several successful analytics-driven marketing programs for different industry verticals like automotive, retail, financial services, media and entertainment, travel, and hospitality, to name a few. Before setting up Hansa Equity, he was working with one of the world's top marketing services companies, the WPP Group in India. He was the national head and executive vice president of iContract, one-to-one agency of contract advertising India, and a subsidiary of JWT India. He's among the early evangelists to lead the data-led marketing and analytics thinking in the APAC region. Under his stewardship, iContract became a top-ranking one-to-one marketing agency, both in terms of revenue growth, new business wins, and awards. Under his leadership, the agency won the prestigious Cannes Lions Direct Gold Award. It was the first time that India won a direct line in this category. Over the last 3 decades, he's had a rich experience of handling Indian and international client relationships. He holds a bachelor's degree in engineering and a postgraduate degree in management. He's an avid blogger, podcaster, and runs his own blog and podcast. He also teaches at leading management institutes and regularly writes in leading management dailies and magazines. He's also a fellow of the Institute of Direct Marketing, London. His other interests include Indian classical music. He's an accomplished percussionist himself. Swami, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks, Subhra. That was too long an introduction. So, I think people will get bored. So let's get started with the discussion. I presume they want to learn a lot more rather than learning about ourselves. Sure. Thanks. I agree with Sapna on the introduction.
Yeah. Our final guest is Vaidyanathan Ramani. Vaidya is currently the head of products and innovation center of PolicyBazaar.com. The largest online aggregator in the country, and has led multiple roles and businesses throughout his career. Prior to his role, he was the joint business head and product head for the health insurance business at Policy Bazaar, where he successfully established market-leading segmentation strategies to drive online adoption in health insurance across the country. He also helped establish innovative marketing platforms and a long-term renewal strategy for the business that has helped anchor the unit as a key pillar for Policy Bazaar. Now, in his current role, Vaidya is working with all major insurance partners for building up new products that help leverage the digital channels for handling the unmet needs and derive value from insurance products for a vast majority of customers. Prior to this, he was with Royal Sundaram, India's oldest private insurance company, where he led the company's strategy on M&A, growth, and profitability. He was also recognized for his efforts as a global leader for Royal and Sun Alliance, a $9 billion insurance conglomerate and member of the FTSE 100 London. And he's also postgraduate in business administration from IIM Bangalore and an engineer from the College of Engineering, Guindy. Vaidya, warm welcome to you as well. Thank you so much for taking your time out.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Wonderful. So without further ado, let's kickstart this session. So let me start by asking you, and maybe Sapna, you could go first, Swami next, and Vaidya third. I think from a digital marketing perspective, COVID probably happened at the intersection of 2 decades. As we look at the last decade from a digital marketing perspective and the next one, what are some big shifts and trends you're seeing in how marketing and customer experience is evolving? Sapna, if you could just start there.
That was like the first thing, if I had to. It's a very broad question, so I guess we'll take it in bits. And I think the second thing that I would like to kind of really stress upon is that, the key thing that COVID has, this whole situation of pandemic, from our perspective, has been the care that we kind of give and, what you say and what you do. The reality between, the promise and the moment of truth is extremely important. So, if you looked at marketing, from, you talked about a decade back, in the last 2 years. So the consumers want to, really, they're with you, they're at you, the rise of the social, the ORM, co-creation. Those were not things that we kind of did, when you started looking at, and I come from a traditional, so Gilvey, marketing being an art, it's become more of science. It's really, it's shaken quite a few people up. And I think it's really about adapting to that learning, because consumers have moved. So your marketing and business models need to move. So I'll leave it at that right now.
Wonderful. Swami, I know you've really seen a spectrum of customers during COVID as well. And I think obviously, you've sort of seen the shift happen. Maybe it accelerated, but what are those shifts, big shifts that happened, and what's your take on sort of how things are going to evolve over the next decade or so?
So Subra, I think literally, if you ask me, organizations take these disruptive, transformation only when things like COVID happened, because everybody always knew that, this was happening. You already had digital, spends growing at 30%, and, you had all of that going. I think customer data was there. But clearly, I think if you really look at the term marketing, the way marketing was defined, literally was about saying, hey, I run a marketing department, I run some communication, I do some digital advertising, and marketing is done. Okay. But the definition of marketing has changed due to the COVID pandemic, because marketing is really about the experience, right? So I call the call center, nobody picks up because obviously, the call center is not working. I go to the website, I put in a ticket that, my claims is not being processed, or, my car is broken down, or, I'm ordering online. Suddenly marketing is about the experience. Okay. So therefore, I think the biggest disruption that I would say, which in my opinion is a very, very big shift, and I think it's still happening. I would call it at an algorithmic pace, not at a exponential pace, is marketing is experience. So I keep calling it MX. So marketing experience is actually, the holistic approach to you feeling about the brand. So it's no more like what Sapna said. We always know it's an art, but you actually look at the brand and then say, is my experience good? And the experience is not just about what I feel about the brand, but what the brand does to me when actually things are not happening the way I think. That's really where I think marketers need to change their mindset. And I think that acceleration, I believe, will happen, and that's the big change that I'm seeing. So I'm seeing, like BCAD, I'm saying pre-COVID, post-COVID, I think marketing has to change that way if at all brands have to make an impact in consumers' lives.
Wonderful. Oh, that's a very interesting perspective there, MX. Vaidya, over to you. What are your thoughts on this?
So, I mean, we are a digital entity, per se, right? So for us, digital marketing was what was bread and butter and continues to be. So probably a little unlike other entities who had a mixture of marketing mix at their front. I think we were fairly heavily digital oriented. But having said that, I would say if the question was, did COVID transform something, and does it say something about the full transformation from this decade to next decade? Then I'll pick it up this way from a digital marketing perspective. And I'm going to use COVID as an example of what happened in the last 12 months. And I think if you just take that backward a little bit of what gradually happened over the decade and what we expect for the next decade, it may be a good example to look at. So let me put it this way. Whenever we are looking at any kind of new mode, marketing mode, new methodology, let's say digital marketing, right? At any point in time, if I just visualize the entire set of people in the market as a set of 100 people, at any point in time, you are building something like a digital marketing that's slowly expanding its window from the earliest adopters, the first 2-3 people, towards potentially what could one day you're hoping would cover the entire set of 100, the gamut of 100. And it's a gradual process. Year on year, you're expanding the scope of people who come into it. Now, what you will always understand is what works for the first 3 people. The friction for the first 3 people is very low because they themselves are early adopters. They're willing to work with you in the mode. They're somewhere tuned to that mode because that's how the early mediums get made up, right? If you look at the first 20 people, they are very different from the remaining 80. They are far more oriented towards it, which is why there was a natural selection for them to come. If you start looking at the first 50 people, they're again different from the rest 50.
Yeah.
Now, as this whole window expands, one has to rethink of the strategies that were working for you in the past. You could have probably been extremely good for the first 3 people, the first 3 percentile, because they are naturally adopting what you give. But the minute you expand, leverage the digital marketing from the 3 to the 10, the same techniques won't work. You probably have to work around how to implicitly understand what the customer wants, how to implicitly use a lot of intelligence to filter them out, use a lot of intelligence to present what they will require, or figure out all augmentative capabilities, telecalling centers, chatbots, by which you can try and enable them. Now, the reason I brought this up is to say what would have normally happened in 5 years or maybe 3 years, COVID made sure it happened in 3 months. It suddenly went from, let's say, 15 to suddenly people having no other mode to go for. And we are in the business of insurance. We are in the middle of pandemic. What do you need more? People suddenly wanted insurance, more and more of it. Suddenly, the 15 became 45. People were 45 or 50 because people were desperate to get something. They were willing to come online to just get that kind of solution. Now, what works for 15 does not work for 45. So, over a short period of time, entities like us managed to, and we are continuing to, evolve ourselves from what was working before to bringing a lot more intelligence to handle this flow of volume. Now, one may say, it's one could expect to say this was a temporary blip. Things have kind of settled down. All of us can see that things have settled down a bit now. But I think what it showed is the minute that you brought people up, if you expected 15 to become 45 in 4 years, it's probably going to happen now in 2 years because the people have been given a sense of what can happen. So it makes sense that we continue to evolve what would work for the 45 pretty fast. And I think and we can go about debating whether it is intelligence, whether it is augmentative technologies, whether it is even looking at offline, something that we probably started seeing. But I think what COVID has done is just made sure it is a bridge, as you rightly said, is because what it has done is it's shown this is where we leave the past decade pre-COVID. This is where potentially we would exceed by the time the next decade ends. And that's just a blip, and we've slightly gone back to being business as usual.
Wonderful. Swami, I know you were obviously, what were you seeing? Because you were obviously sort of maybe you have the vantage position of, sort of being seated across different industries, right? So what were you seeing across the board, and what were you really telling customers during this time in terms of how they should adopt or what they should or should not do?
So I think, Subra, the key point was just imagine, a zero demand situation, right? I'm a retailer, and I just, I really don't have anything that I could kind of, footfalls are not in my, control, and suddenly, every Friday evening, retailers are used to sending you messages saying, "Hey, here is an offer. Please walk into the mall."
Yeah.
Suddenly, they just don't have anything to kind of communicate, which is if you are an offline retailer. And suddenly, you have the Amazons of the world. Actually, the business is booming. So, which means that how do you really transform this, offline customer to their digital channels? I think there was a big change that they had to kind of make. While these organizations, what I saw in a typical retail was the e-commerce team, of a typical offline retailer would, do initiatives independently vis-a-vis an offline, retail team. So they had to kind of quickly come together, and that's a big change that one saw. So that was one thing. And number two is, what would you communicate? I don't have anything. Marketing typically is used to communicating, about a brand, about offers and things like that. Suddenly, I don't have anything to communicate. So
Yeah.
you have to use data intelligently. So imagine if I bought a running shoes 6 months back, if I was a retailer, would you communicate to me and say, what, hey, are you kind of still, doing your fitness regime? So everything need not be a transactional message. You need to do a lot of relationship messages. Okay, I think that's the biggest sense. Whether you are in automotive, whether you are in financial services, I heard Deepak also talk about demand for a bank, dropping, hugely. But the fact is that the bank has to build a relationship with me, because when times are good, then I need to be with the bank. So I think marketing moved from transactional to actually being relationship driven, and every time you don't even have to buy. Okay, I think that's the big shift that we were talking.
Very valuable input there. Yeah. So I think just the other big trend, of course, that gets talked about every time we look at the next decade, and sort of the early trends that we saw, in the last decade. And I think maybe one could go as far as saying that no discussion on maybe intelligent marketing is really complete without a reference to, let's say, MLAI, machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I think just shifting gears here, there is a lot of mischaracterization of terms like machine learning and artificial intelligence. So I do want to start by asking each one of you, maybe Sapna, you could go first again. What does machine learning, artificial intelligence really mean to you? Like, how would you sort of define it, right? And have you, or how do you plan to sort of leverage MLAI?
I'm getting all the hard questions first. That seems to be the plot. Okay, fine. Anyway, so Shubhra, see, I think if I had to think of this, I'll answer it from a marketing KPI kind of review. Okay, now what is my first KPI now in 2021? Right, it's customer acquisition. Okay, now that's a KPI. It's a growth. So the growth of the organization, growth of business. And what is also happening is that the cost of acquisition, and I think, Vaidyanathan and teams have been, leading it for us, is something that's becoming, pretty expensive, as we scale, as we say, the organic or the intent customers are fine, but as we grow this channel and, expand it, and, a lot of learnings on the other side of the table. But from my perspective, that's a game that we need to understand and play better. So that's where I feel the power of really understanding who are the high intent customers. How can I reduce the cost of acquisition? And that's cohorts. This is the customer set.
Yeah.
From an X behavior will be an easier and I can balance the whole portfolio. So I think that's a space that we are really keen to kind of develop more insights on from the cost of acquisition and a customer acquisition perspective.
Yeah.
Staying on the same thing, the other part of our, like a marketing KPI is the cost of retention. So for me, again, and for many organizations like us, it's like the customers that you already have, to be able to cross-sell and upsell to them is a better bet, and use them as a base than go and, cost of acquiring a new customer. So, understanding this profile, trying to upsell to this profile, again in a smarter way, is, again trying to kind of build intelligence and continuous learning, around them is another whole area. So under cost of acquisition, new customer, and retention. So that would be, I would just place it on the table as maybe the first kind of a situation.
Yeah.
I think the second and the important thing, for us also is the quality of business, because, at least, for an insurer, it's also the claim ratio and the loss ratios
Absolutely.
that are very important to our P&L. So top line and NBP, and that's of course the top end of the funnel where the whole digital marketing plays. But increasingly, to build a sustainable kind of a model, you need to kind of see that this is the kind of customer I want to go for.
Yeah.
And this is the kind of customer that I need to, focus on, and that again enhances. Sometimes the level of information and learning that you need to get, and staying in the same bucket is the whole aspect of underwriting and fraud management on the quality of business.
Yeah.
So because of the way our the whole health insurance ecosystem is structured, controlling that cost and having a sense of, here are the fraud pockets, here is an underlining alert, here is an extra question I should ask.
Yeah.
Here I should simplify.
Yeah.
Here I should simplify, there I should ask. So that intelligence is something that, we are looking to further the experience on, so that most of the experience for the customers that you want becomes seamless, and you're able to flag off, situations where you want to make a little more friction.
Yeah.
So I think that balance is a great opportunity, for us to kind of, for organizations to look at. And if I had to add another third lever is, of course, the entire, the customer servicing aspect. Some of the questions probably don't need as much assistance at a call center, but a lot of automation can really help.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I would think about it.
Got it. I have a follow-up question there, but just to summarize, so basically the three broad buckets you called out. One is maybe a little bit more top of the funnel cost of acquisition and thinking in terms of upsells, etc. Then the quality of the business itself that you're getting, and how can you improve it, and potentially angles like underwriting and fraud sort of comes there as well. And then the entire servicing aspect, right? So
Yes.
so now, so have you, and again, you might not have, which is perfectly fine, but have you explored or sort of tried to use scaled machine learning in any of these areas, or have you considered it, and what were some of the sort of maybe walk us through the decision frameworks or thought process that you had there?
So I would again say definitely considering it. No, at this place we haven't. I mean, at my current role, I haven't
Sure.
executed it. But for fraud, for fraud management, we built an in-house kind of a system. So that's something that we have maybe moved a little bit, the needle on. Also, I would say from an acquisition point of view, we've kind of been able to now identify the kind of customers, but again, more or less of an in-house learning kind of a system. And I think the second question that you said are the challenges.
Yeah.
So I think it's to do a lot with the on overall realization and the influence and the culture of getting this to be your core focus.
Yeah.
I think it's really about aligning digital, IT, underwriting. So I think it's a lot to do with the culture, of an organization for you to be able to influence, more. So sometimes you end up talking and less on execution, or you might just lose the flow. You start as project X and it becomes project Y. So I think those are things that you need to live with, and you need to kind of really keep pushing and getting that vision shared across the organization, and more or less, I feel that there is a lot more openness, and I think the acceleration will be much faster towards this across organizations.
Okay. So, Vaidya, let me jump on to you there, and then Swami, I would love to sort of gather your thoughts there. So, yeah, I know there's always this new shiny tool to the temptation to always use that, but maybe just define that new shiny tool for everybody the way you see it, and then how you think it could be leveraged or how you are actually using it.
Yeah. So for us, AI ML means it's an assessment methodology for us, where we would want to deploy it when we think it's beyond the normal typical realm of assessment, and it could include anything. We're not restricted by anything. Anytime we are moving beyond what would be a typical assessment, right? Straightforward assessment. Now, and so it may be a little broad criteria that I'm giving, right? So how do I assess, how do I treat what is an AML kind of an output to be able to take it forward as a company? So for us, an AML output has to be respected or considered with two factors in mind.
Yeah.
Because you're applying it in a certain scenario. You have to accept and understand that the outputs that you get out of this methodology will be two-pronged. One, it's going to be probabilistic in nature. It's going to be more or less giving you a sense of what things are. It's not definitive. You have to accept it's going to come with probabilistic output. The second is that this is built for a certain directed, actionable, focused outcome. It's built with something in mind. The whole probabilistic outcome is built towards answering that question, and that's it. The reusability of anything else has to be really thought of. There could be more modules that you can use, but you started with a question, you get a probabilistic outcome, you have to know how to use that probabilistic outcome to move forward, and therefore build your decision making around it, which can result in explicit changes for the customer and so on. So now, having said that's a broad dream of AI/ML that we work with. That anything that's, I mean, you can realize that therefore if it's beyond the typical assessment realm, I'm talking about multiple parameters, a lot of interlinkage between them, kind of looking at multi-dimensional view of customers, a single view source of customer and all everything. But having said that, where do we deploy it? How deeply do we deploy AML in our system today? Right? For us, for the business that we are in, we are a digital platform. So for us, the usage of AML is going to be much more, I would say, from anybody that we are discussing today with. Having said that, we broadly deploy AML for us in three ways, three places. The first is we use this in a big way in our prospecting of processes. When I say prospecting, there is a lot of propensity analysis that goes into it. And I can take a propensity from all the way from how likely the customer is going to buy, to how likely the customer is going to fraud, to how likely that the customer is going to potentially make a claim, because that's also a part of the risk analysis, to how likely the customer would want something, kind of preference for certain things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot of propensity analysis at the point of sourcing, at the time of prospecting a customer. So there is a lot of, we deploy AML across all these cases in order to provide an answer that's very close to what the customer wants as quickly as we can. The second area where we deploy is what I call personalization. Now that you've sourced the customer, you've determined that the customer is going to be key for you, customer is in a position to buy, you've probably got his broad sense of criteria of what he's looking for. You've got to personalize in a way that's easy for him to adopt.
Yeah.
It kind of answers things what he needs to know. It is broadly what I call implicit choices have to be determined based on whatever you know of the customer,
Sure.
seamlessly, so that you start suggesting it to him and make him go through the process faster. So there's a lot of personalization involved the minute the customer lands on the platform itself, till the point he gets a transaction, or even till the point he gets a service. The third area where we do is somewhere feeding into the first two, but it's probably the most important, because while everything I've said is under the hood, the customer may not really see it. I mean, he sees the outcome, but he may not see the wow factor, right? The third aspect where we deploy is on information sourcing, be it information sourcing in terms of getting information from context. Let's say voice analytics, right? The customer is speaking about something. How do you determine what he really wanted? It could be document information sourcing, right, from starting from simple OCR to actually complex determination of outputs. It could be from multiple entities outside the platform, wherever the customer is willingly decide to share the information about. Now, all of this are feeding into my first two processes, but these processes are probably more in the face for the customer. Suppose the customer gives me a document, a medical document that needs to be read, right? And we actually produce the output back to them. That's probably more in the face involved. So the third factor is probably more in that range, that it also can help us influence, convey to the customers the capability that we hold today. But it's far more important that all the information that you utilize, the non-traditional sources of information, non-digital input source of information, straightforward digital input source of information, which are very, very essential for you in your prospecting and personalization, come from this one. So today we use AI all across this. And as I said, we are a digital platform. So we got to somewhere lead this. We have the responsibility to lead this forward. So we deploy it all across.
Interesting. So prospecting, personalization, and information sourcing, which in turn feeds the first two. That's what I heard from you. Swami, just jumping over to you, I know, and clearly there is some pattern emerging here with respect to, understanding the context in which AI ML could be used, and then be able to apply that. Again, but then I know that you also come from a school that also tends to take a very rational view of many of these things, and often there could be a lot of hype around this as well. What are your views? Again, how would you define machine learning / AI, and when do you think people should go for it? And what are some trends that you're seeing? Your views here.
So, I tend to agree with both Vaidhi and Sapna that, first is actually having, having a, enterprise-wide strategy.
Sure.
To me, I think the first singular point is, do you have an enterprise-wide strategy on what are your key KPIs? And then start saying, would AI and ML, be deployed for this KPI? I think that's where many times, I do see gaps because, I think there's somebody who asks a question saying, do you use AI ML? And then quickly the team puts something together and then say, oh, here is a AI ML output. Okay. So what I believe is, if you have an enterprise-wide strategy, then see where AI and ML can get deployed. I'll give you some examples. Say, for example, for a very large retailer, we have three key, KPIs, which is to say, how do I increase my conversion? How do I increase my, card buy rate? How do I actually improve retention? Now, if you have to use all of this, is there an opportunity for AI and ML to be used? I'll take, because I think I've seen, BFSI examples. I'm taking a retail example.
Sure.
And here, what we really did was we actually applied AI ML in understanding, actually applying what kind of color people buy. Okay. Again, an application to say, hey, you seem to be liking blues and you seem to be liking denims. Okay. And you seem to be purchasing from this store often. And therefore, here is a set of recommendations of products and, that you may want to kind of buy. So therefore, here is an application of AI and ML based on my, basket, which I've purchased in the past, because I have three objectives, which is to say, hey, how do I upsell to you? How do I increase engagement with you? And how do I build personalization for you? So literally, we actually did close to about 126 personalization in an email. Okay. So therefore, you just had to say, you went to Phoenix Market City, you actually, bought this blue, shirt. You typically tend to like this perfume. This is really what you're interested in. And suddenly the context of why you kind of communicate to this customer started changing. So therefore, we had to kind of bring in common agreed concepts with the analytics team, with the, with the data team, with the marketing team, with the loyalty team, so many people, we had to bring them together. And therefore, the challenge of having that data culture that Sapna and the, KPI that Vaidhi was talking about was an interesting point. So AI and ML in the context of a strategy is very critical. Or for example, for an automotive, we actually get data, which is like billions of, data points that we get out of the, out of the connected car platform that we have built. Okay. So the idea here is not to just get the data, but to actually say, you know what, typically when you get a call for customers car service today, you just measure it by saying, okay, sir, you've completed 5,000 kilometers, please come and service my car. But imagine that you use the data to kind of go and say, hey, looks like you are driving a lot, okay, and there is actually oil filter needs to get changed, because that's what the IoT data is pulling you into the customer service conversation that you could do. So I think the most important thing is the key KPI that they had was they wanted to improve the customer retention revisit rates to the customer service outlet. So therefore, then how do you use AI and ML in that context? Or for a very large media and entertainment brand, TRA just announced saying that you can't just do your own package. Okay, so you had to kind of then go back and analyze billions and millions of subscriber data, and basically we built a recommendation engine which is completely AI and ML based, where you basically went and said, you know what, this is the package we recommend for you based on what you have been viewing. Okay, in fact, TRA came and said this is the best model because we didn't kind of use it to upsell to customers, but we started building recommendations, and that is something is an application of AI ML. So I've taken 3 different industries.
Yes.
You kind of look at how can application of AI and ML work in these contexts.
Oh, fantastic. I think just getting that broad perspective across industries was obviously incredibly valuable. Thanks, Swami. So I think so the emerging sort of 2 or 3 things that if I were to just summarize for everybody listening in, one is, of course, start from the top, have a culture, have this mindset that you really want to experiment with AI. And I think we heard this in the earlier panel as well, where I think Deepak spoke about culture and having that mindset. And I think from there stems a sort of very specific set of outcomes that you want. And I think one striking thing that you could see in all the examples that Sapna, Vaidya and Swami gave was that there were very clear kind of sort of goals or specific outcomes that was being expected. And I think that is really what was driving any sort of adoption of AI and ML. So fantastic perspectives there. Thank you so much. I do want to throw in a fun question here as well. Again, since we spoke about entering a new decade, I'm going to throw it to all of you 3 panelists. One starting with maybe Sapna. This time I won't give you the hard question first. Let me start with Vaidya and then Swami, and then I'll come to you. Ladies last this time around. Yeah. So what is Vaidya? What's your one big take on what's that one big bold prediction that you have with respect to how you think digital marketing or customer experience is going to evolve in the next decade?
Actually, I think there are 2 things that I always look at. So I don't know which one will be. So I'll probably share both of them that I see. And this is in the context of we're going to see an information explosion, right? Obviously, everybody's moving digital. There's going to be more interconnected customer, and there are going to be more digital systems. We're moving to a digital India and all that. I think there are 2 key trends that I see will happen through the decade. Maybe not in the first 3 years, but somewhere as we mature into the decade. The first trend I see is that just like early adopters moved the needle in favor of digital marketing, there'll be early adopters who will demand privacy over.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So they'll be the first crusaders who will say that let me be allowed to use the information when I want to. Until that point, I should not be identified. None of this intelligence should work on the reams of information I've left around me.
And you see some of that already happening with things like FLOC, coming up. So yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's going to be interesting because all of us will have to find ways around still dealing with the customer, right? That's one side of the key trend I see, the big thing that we will kind of move into. I think the second key trend I see is we should see a lot more voice and video marketing. Today, it's probably not as big in India. I mean, I think for joyful purposes, maybe it's still being used. TikToks have been big and video channels have been big. But from a transactional point of view, service point of view, we've not seen that big an explosion. I think voice and pretty soon following voice video. I think both of this will also again significantly change the way we see digital marketing and the way companies like us leverage information to service the customer better. So I think two trends, both I see will mature through the day.
Wonderful. No, I think, in fact, there are some wonderful startups out there that are working in the voice and the video space as well. I think for folks who are listening in, you should certainly spend some time on both these trends. So privacy is one that you called out, voice and video. In fact, in the context of video, one of sort of the big trends that at least I'm personally tracking is addressable TV. How can you sort of, as more and more TV viewing goes online, right? So obviously, the old world TV advertising and the way you did advertising is also going to shift. Maybe in the context of video, you could potentially also bring in addressable TV as well. So yeah, fantastic there. Swami, your views.
So I don't think it was a fun question here. I think it's a very serious question. So I think
to go wild and sort of make one big sort of bold thing, but yeah, it is a serious. There is a very serious element as well. Yeah.
I think the fun answer for me is, next decade we should not meet saying that this is the trend that we are looking at. Maybe we need to see more examples of it getting done. That's the way. That's the way I see it. Having said that, I think the key trend that I'm seeing is I think enterprises need to have a connected customer strategy. Okay, I think which is when I think it's going to work, because you must have a connected marketing strategy, you must have a connected customer service strategy, you must have a connected operation strategy, connected sales strategy, which is really where I think typically a CMO like Sapna or others, I think they just keep jumping around with so many agency providers that the data is actually fragmented. Okay, so I will be talking to a BTL agency, they will be throwing data in an offline mode. Okay, I'll be talking to the digital agency, they will be only talking performance marketing. Okay, I'll be talking to my customer service guy, they'll be talking about cross sell and upsell. Okay, so I think most of them actually kind of look at it from one tunnel, and I almost think that the CMO's job today has become like an orchestrator like Zubin Mehta, just trying to get every agency to kind of think together. So that's really where I think a CDP kind of a platform is going to help, because don't do BTL the old way. Do BTL the digital way. Look at digital marketing not as just performance and things like that, but look at it from actually how do you extract value from the funnel. Okay, so therefore how are you going to be doing that? So I think there is a need for actually getting this connected thinking in the organization, and I think that's the trend, and for which I personally believe skills are missing in marketing department. So to me, the biggest trend is how many of us are going to get reskilled to this new to this new change that's going to happen. That I think is the key, and I see marketing departments working with analysts, creative people, tech people, and your ability to kind of be not just right-brained or left-brained, but whole-brained is really what I'm thinking is going to be the future.
Wonderful. And I think, of course, as Lemnisk, I couldn't be happier that you pointed out CDP as one of the trends that is going to be there for the decade. So thanks for calling that out. Let's go to our Zubin Mehta in the end. Sapna, your views on what the big trends are going to be.
Okay, so thanks for that. And see, I think, Shubhra, when I have to look at this, I want to kind of look at this from two points. One, as a consumer, as a consumer taking in, the example Swami talked about, retail, and, they know my color, they know what I wear, they know when I come in, I'm unnerved, so I completely resonate with Vaidyanathan's point on privacy, so it scares me as a consumer, and I might be one of those early adopters that might kind of, and I've already, to a large extent, I'm there, I don't want it, because I want to have that choice. So, that choice should be mine if I want to share that, and if you should use that, and I should know you're using that, I don't want you to tell me, it's really that whole thing of what is that fine balance, and, do I want it? Does the consumer want it? See, I might want it, but I have to give you a consent for it. So if I consent and then you give me stuff and I find it useful for me, like for example in news, I know the kind of stuff I want to read. They map it and I get it. I am fine with it. But if it goes into an area which I don't want you to know, I am uncomfortable with it. So I think that's something very important from marketing. And I would say marketing as a function should be a ethics flag bearer of the organization.
Yeah.
We shouldn't take it to a level that, that it cracks. So, we should take it to a level where it is ethical, consumer is with you, and they want to share it with you. So I think it's very important, from a marketing perspective to kind of take that role that, look, I am at first a consumer's voice, and, that's the way I would say it at the first level. And I think at the second level, I would say that maybe the marketing CMO won't be required, 10 years down the line. If there is a lot of automation, and I think very true on the upskilling, reskilling. I mean, it's glaring on the changed skills that are required, and it's for example, we are really talking about the AI/ML only at the level of media to a large extent, but I also think creative and the kind of messaging could also get automated, and there are lots of early shoots there that you might not even need to create an ad, and you have the right segment, you've got it down, you've got the right message, and it's being personalization at scale. I mean, it is a reality, right? And you might have to really rethink the whole way things are being done, because I'm seeing so much work, not only in terms of targeting and prospecting, but also messaging and content. You're really able to create content, and it's fascinating. So I think we really need to think how the marketing function will evolve in the next 10 years. Is it a marketing tech function? Is it what's the role of the orchestration? But so we'll have to see how that moves.
Wonderful. But I'm fairly certain that we will see a CMO a decade down the line. Of that, I'm fairly certain. So yeah, thank you so much, Sapna, Swami, Vaidya. As always, incredible speaking to you. Thanks for generously sort of sharing your knowledge with the audience today. There's a lot of key takeaways there. Thank you very much. Given we are sort of
Thanks a lot.
So the idea here is to really bring you an exploration of what it takes to implement and execute a successful digital transformation strategy. And in that context, I'm thrilled to introduce Sanjaya for this session. Sanjaya is the Senior Vice President, Personal Banking, Marketing and Customer Experience at National Development Bank, Sri Lanka. So, just to very quickly introduce him, I hope he's in the call. Is he there or has he dropped off? He might have an issue, potentially. He might have dropped off. Great. So I think we will, obviously, given there were 2 or 3 challenges with Sanjay joining, so I think we will therefore, the best thing is to, we will probably organize a separate webinar with Sanjay, because his views on transformational marketing is obviously incredible. He has done that, been there, done that for NDP. So we will record a separate session and share it with the audience. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of the event today. I hope you can all carry away nuggets of insights from today's session. Just a quick administrative point before we close. This is obviously the third and final leg of the 3 summits we are holding. We had a stellar set of speakers for the other events as well. And the recording for today's summit, as well as the earlier ones, will be available on demand after the event. So please do watch out on social channels and Lemnisk's social channels and website. You should also get an email. If you would like to connect with us and know more about Lemnisk, as I mentioned, you can write to us at marketing@lemnisk.co, or you can also write to me directly at subra.krishnan@lemnisk.co. Once again, thank you very much for joining us today. Good evening and stay safe, everyone.